Does everybody have a copy of the agenda?
They just walked in, Beth and this other lady.
All right, so Chairwoman, I think we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and then move to Pledge of Allegiance.
Here we go. The Monday, March 21st meeting of the Health Code Advisory Board is hereby called to order. And we will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Jennifer, would you like to lead us in that?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oath of office.
Yes, ma'am. So our next item will be the administration of the Statement of Officer and Oath of Office for our new members. And these members are, all right. And those will be Jennifer Bryant and Lisa Page. If you could come down, please, and we'll swear both of you in at the same time.
Come down here.
Yes, ma'am. And Juan Paulette will administer the oath of office.
All right, we'll start off with the statement of officer first. So if I can please get both of you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lisa Page,
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I have not directly or indirectly paid.
do solemnly swear.
Okay, we'll start over.
Yeah, put that down.
Do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear or affirm
that I have not directly or indirectly paid,
that I have not directly or indirectly paid,
offered, promised to pay,
offered, promised to pay,
contributed, or promised to contribute
contributed, or promised to contribute
any money or thing of value,
any money or thing of value,
or promised any public office or employment
or promised any public office of
Or
employment,
or-
or employment,
for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected. Or I'll just keep going. Or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation,
or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation,
whichever the case may be, so help me God.
whichever the case may be, so help me God.
Okay. Do you want to get them to sign that first and then go to the
Well, I'm
next
going to
one?
sign it after the meeting, yeah.
Okay, we got one more. I'm sorry.
Okay.
This is the oath of office. Right hand, and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lisa Page,
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties
of the office of the Health Code and Advisory Board of the State of Texas,
of the office of the
You're
gonna have to do it shorter.
Health Code and Advisory Board
Health Code Advisory Board
of the State of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and the laws of the United States
the Constitution and the laws of the United States
and of this state, so help me God.
and of the state, so help me God.
Congratulations.
And we'll have you ladies sit at these two chairs because we don't have enough room for everyone. So, we've got the speakers, you guys can do what you see. All right. Yes, it's a little warm in here. All right, this next item is open forum. So in addition to the public comment on agenda items, the board just offered open forum where citizens can comment on the governance issues over which the city has domain. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the board shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics not posted as an agenda item. And speakers should address all remarks to the board and limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. So at this time, I'll just step aside and see if there's anyone from the public who would just like to provide general public comment. There's no one. So we'll move on to the next item. The next item is approval of the minutes from March 27th, 2019. We apologize for not getting those to you ahead of time, so if you would like a moment to just review those, you should have a copy at your place. If not, please let me know. I believe they should be towards the front of your binder packet.
Yes.
All right, so whenever you're ready, Chairwoman, we can call for a motion.
If we have all had time to look at the minutes, is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved as presented.
All right, so as far as the order of agenda, we've already gone through the oath of office for new members. We'll do some introductions, and then we'll go over the board's roles, procedures, information regarding conflict of interest and Open Meetings Act. So to start off, let me introduce myself. My name's Lana Helton. I'm the Director of Planning and Neighborhood Services. And what I'd like to do now is let the board introduce themselves with your name, your role as far as your professional association, and then anything else you think the board would be interested or might need to know about your position. So we'll go left to right. Beth, would you like to go first?
Sure.
And you speak into the microphone, please.
My name is Beth Blackburn. I am the owner and operator of Reggae Child Care Center, and I've been serving on this board for quite a few years.
All right, thank you.
My name is Jennifer Bryant. I work for the Humane Society of Nacogdoches County. This is my first year here, first meeting.
My name is Robin Thacker, and I'm the Director of Student Nutrition for the Nacogdoches Independent School District. So I'm in charge of all of the student nutrition and food service operations for the district. And I've been on this board since 2011.
I'm Ann Doyle Anderson. I retired from SFA. I'm the director of St. Francis Rescue Nacogdoches, which is a dog rescue here in town, and I've been on the board for a number of years, worked with Teresa for a number of years also.
I'm Donna Fickus. I am an instructor at SFA in Human Sciences and Hospitality, and this is my second term on the board.
I'm Hunter Skeep. I work for a company called Winco Incorporated. I work in Oklahoma, Idaho, and Texas, and I've been doing that for about, 35 years. And I've been on this board. I think they had a law where they had to tie up horses right out front. It's been a while.
And I'm Lisa Page, and my volunteer work is through NAC Foster Rescue, which also works with the shelter. I'm a founding member of that board, and then professionally I work at the probation department as a probation officer, but in this capacity it's going to be animal welfare, like Ann.
And we will be getting nameplates for all the board members. I apologize, we don't have those today, so please bear with me as I learn your names. And we'll make some staff introductions. I'll ask the staff to stand up as I introduce them, and then during the presentation, they're going to come up and tell you a little bit about what it is that they do in the departments that they work with. Juan Paulette, he's our planning technician. Juan, wave. And then over here to your right, to my left, we have Rhonda Lewis. She's our office assistant in the planning department. And then we have Teresa Jordan, our animal services manager. We have Kevin Hammett, health inspector. And then we have Angela Sal, our code enforcement supervisor. And so what we'll do is we're going to go through kind of the broad overview of the purpose of our health codes and the directive of the committee. And then we're going to talk about the different roles and functions of the various departments that you'll be working with. We'll talk about some organizational structure. Like I said, we're going to get into just some state mandates on conflict of interest that apply to all boards, as well as Open Meetings Act. And then at the end, we'll open it up, or actually during the meeting, as we're talking about the different departments, we'll allow for questions if you should have any. And then at the end, we'll ask the committee if there's any future agenda items that they'd be interested in hearing for future discussion. And so with that, does anyone have any questions so far? All right, perfect. All right, so the purpose of the Code of Ordinance, or the health codes, well, actually first we're going to talk about organizational structure. So here we go. A little bit out of order. So the purpose of the health codes at their core are to, again, protect public health, safety, and welfare. They can also be used to implement goals and objectives found in the city's comprehensive plan, and they're intended to protect community resources and protect the public and private investment. And so that's just a broad overview of the goals and objectives of the various codes. As far as the organizational structure, so City Council is the governing body. They appoint the Health Code Advisory Board, and the Health Code Advisory Board makes policy recommendations and recommendations on ordinance amendments to the City Council for final determination. As far as your staff liaisons, they include the Health Inspector, which is Kevin Hammett, Code Enforcement Supervisor, Andy LaSalle, Animal Services Supervisor, Teresa Jordan, and then our City Attorney. And so he might be conferring with you from time to time regarding different ordinance amendments and legal standards and things of that sort. And so we'll be bringing him forward as needed. And if you're interested in his contact information in your binder, let's actually go over the binder a little bit. So each board member was presented a binder. All right, this is your handy-dandy notebook. In the beginning, we have a welcome letter, and then it's tabs. So you have the welcome tab, and then on the next one is contact and organization information. So this is staff's direct contact information. It includes our email and phone number, and then a city or organizational chart. So if you'll notice, under Planning and Neighborhood Services on the far right, that's actually a new department. Prior to October of last year, the Planning and Zoning Department was standalone under engineering, and then Animal Services was under Community Services, which included Parks and Rec, Cemetery, and Historic Sites. And then Code Enforcement was under Inspections. The City Council really wanted to take a more proactive approach to code enforcement, animal control, and be more neighborhood-oriented. And so they did combine Animal Services, Code Enforcement, which includes health, and Planning and Zoning into a single department to be more strategic in our approach to improving overall quality of life for the city and reinvigorating our neighborhoods, which is really the heart of the community. And so that's where you see that organizational change. And with that comes new staff. And so at one point in time, Angela Sal was the Code Enforcement Department. She was a department of one, overseeing code enforcement for the entire city, essentially. Except in regards to Kevin Hammett, which is our health inspector, but we'll get into that in just a minute. So with the change, we did hire one additional full-time code enforcement staff and 2 new part-time staff. And so it has increased our capacity to proactively enforce codes of the city. Going back to the handbook, so we have meeting procedures and the rules and procedures. That's just the parliamentary rules on how to conduct a meeting. And so the board doesn't have formally adopted procedures like some of our other boards, so it does allow more flexibility in how we conduct our meetings. And then you have a tab with general information on Texas Open Meetings Act. The following tab is appointment and attendance policy. And so this is a general policy that applies to all boards and commissions across the city. If you have any questions about that, you can let us know. Also, there's a absence request form. So every time we schedule a meeting, we'll send you a copy of this absence request form. And then you'll just, if you're not able to attend, you'll fill that out and send it back to us. We do have hybrid meetings now, which means that board members can attend remotely as long as we have a physical quorum. And so that means majority. And so from time to time, we can accommodate a remote attendance if needed. But typically, we do like to have physical attendance whenever we can. Code of Ordinances, these are just copies of the general sections of the Code of Ordinances that would be applicable to the purview of the board. So it includes food service establishments, care and welfare of animals, health and sanitation. And so this is essentially a reference guide. We also have all this information online, but we wanted you to have a physical copy, and so that way you could just review it in your leisure. And so that's an overview of the binder. That as we have meetings moving forward, you can add to the binder, but we'll always have physical copies of the materials that we'll go over in the meeting, and we'll always send you digital copies ahead of time. Any questions about the binder? Okay. All right. My mouth gets so dry. Okay. So Health Code Board roles and responsibilities. Again, the Health Code Advisory Board is appointed by City Council, and they act as advisors and make recommendations on policies and ordinance amendments regarding care of animals, health and sanitation, and certain building regulations. This is just a excerpt from the organizational chart that we had in your packet, just showing you the organizational structure, including the community at large, City Council, City Manager's Office, and then Planning and Neighborhood Services, which includes Code Enforcement and Health, Animal Services, and then Planning and Zoning. All right, so we're going to kick it off with Animal Services. I'm going to go over a couple of slides that provide generally the mission of the department, the functions, some statistics, and then I'm going to let Teresa come in here and just talk broadly and provide an overview about her functions and let the board ask any questions that they may have. So, also, we're going to provide you a copy of this PowerPoint digitally, and then we'll provide a printed copy if you'd like to come by and pick up a copy later, or we can always mail it to you. Just let us know. So the mission of Animal Services is to encourage the importance of responsible pet ownership, educate the community about city ordinances and state statutes regarding animal control, and promote the importance of spaying and neutering to reduce pet overpopulation, and euthanasia. The city employs 8 staff members to perform all shelter duties. And so those include three animal control officers, 3 kennel attendants, a office front desk assistant, and Teresa. The functions of the Animal Services Department include responding to animal complaints within the city limits, enforcing the city code of ordinances, writing citations, investigating animal cruelty and bite cases, and testifying in court. They also provide animal care information and education, and encouraging responsible pet ownership in cooperation with the Humane Society in Nacogdoches County. They also provide information and assistance with spaying and neutering. They euthanize animals. They vaccinate, administer medication, and conduct heartworm testing for animals that are available for adoption, and they act as the local rabies control authority. As part of that local rabies control authority, they do act as that for the entire county of Nacogdoches. It's not just for the city, it's the entire county. The shelter staff maintains quarantine rooms in which all bite cases are required to stay for at least a 240-hour quarantine period. And all the staff members are vaccinated for pre-exposure to rabies as part of that local authority designation. Some of the statistics from the past 3 years, and you can see it's pretty consistent across each category. So of our intakes, the majority of these are either adopted, fostered, reclaimed, or relocated to a rescue. So when we look at the percentage, over 75% of all our intakes are rehomed, whether that's adoption, again, foster, reclaimed by the owner, or rescued. Unfortunately, we do have to euthanize because we do service the entire county. And so about 34% on average is our current euthanasia rate. We are taking steps to reduce that number by increasing our foster activities. I'm going to let Teresa talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Actually, I'm going to let her talk about that now. So, Teresa, if you would come up and just give the board just a brief overview of your role and functions, and then we'll let the board ask any questions. So I'm going to.
Good afternoon. Teresa Jordan, Animal Services Manager. As far as my duties, I am in charge of operating the shelter, making sure we have staff, make sure they receive the training that they need in order to do the duties required by their jobs. We work with the community, we work with organizations nationwide to get animals out of the shelter, and we're doing a lot right now to increase our live rescue or live exit rates. In 2018, I believe we were at 62% euthanasia rate. 2020, we were at 54. 21, we were down to 42, and this year we are into the 30s. So we are working really hard at getting as many animals out as we possibly can, and getting those euthanasia rates down. And we are not only just through coordination with our existing staff and other organizations, we work with rescues like Ann's and foster organizations like Lisa's and the Humane Society. And we also have an existing foster base. And so we're just trying to incorporate more people into those areas and go a little bit further reaching. And we're sending animals right now all the way up to New Jersey and South Carolina and all over the United States. So we work with rescues that coordinate transports and things like that to get them from Texas into foster homes until they can get transported to where they're going and get adopted out. So we're going to continue to do that. Goal eventually, one of these days, fingers crossed, and with a lot of effort and hopefully community involvement, we will get down to that 10% or lower rate, which would technically label us as no kill. That's the ultimate goal for any shelter, so we're really working towards that. And the Humane Society, we work directly with them as far as distributing vouchers for spays and neuters. So every adoption that happens at the shelter is the adopter is given a voucher that comes from the Humane Society. They cover a portion of the cost for that to ensure that not only are we meeting compliance with state for the required spay or neuter, but it also helps new pet owners with the cost of new pet ownership. It can be quite expensive. So it's all about working together as a community and making sure that we're getting animals out and doing what's best for everybody involved. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I do have one question. So do you just, do you have dogs and cats, or do you have other animals that are part of
We
your
have,
services?
well, traditionally we have dogs and cats. We do get, around Easter time, we get lots of bunnies. Parents buy their bunnies for their kids, and then they decide that they're a little bit more work than they originally thought. Sometimes with students that are in ag, they'll have bunnies that they no longer need for their ag projects, and they'll donate those to the shelter. We get hamsters, gerbils, birds, snakes. We've gotten turtles before. We've had goldfish. We've had guppies. We've had just a wealth of anything that you can find in a pet store. More than likely at one time, since in the 8 years that I've been there, we've had.
I kind of figured it was just mostly cats and dogs, but I figured that we might have some
Yes.
other things as well.
When you transport animals, are you transporting them to place them somewhere, and how do you transport them? I tried to get a dog here from Pittsburgh, and it was almost impossible. So how do you do that, and financially, what does that mean?
The shelter does not pay for transport.
Okay.
We work with rescues. The rescues provide people that are within their rescue that will come to the shelter and pick the animals up, take them on their first leg out to the next transport, and then it's usually there's multiple legs of a transport.
Okay.
There's if they're transporting by vehicle, then there may be 5 or 6 legs of this transport when they go from state to state to state, and they just have people throughout the United States that work with that particular rescue or work with other rescues, and they're just all working together to get those animals where they need to go. There are several other organizations. Pilots for Paws, I believe, is one, where there's pilots that donate their planes and their time, and for a base fee, they will transport up to 12, 15 animals for anywhere in the United States, and it's usually anywhere from $300 to $500 with prices of gas going up now. I imagine that's probably going to increase just a little bit, but they do work together to get animals from place to place. So takes a lot of work, takes a lot of coordination with a lot of different people.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Teresa. And so next, we're going to talk about health inspections. So the mission of our health inspections department is to serve the public and ensure the health and safety of the citizens of Nacogdoches, and continually educate and provide guidance to the permitted facilities that we inspect to help prevent food poisoning and foodborne illnesses. We also provide customer service and information to the public and to future permitted facilities. And so some of the primary functions of the health department include inspecting and permitting food service establishments, including food sales. And so we'll talk about food service versus food sales. Also, nursing home and hospitals that serve food. That includes bars, daycares, lodging, swimming pools, and spas. So that's the swimming pools and spas are a separate type of health permit. As far as the food service establishments, that includes restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, food trucks, so your mobile vendors, and other meal providers such as the school district and the county jail. So if you serve food in the city, we're going to permit you and inspect you. Specific to food, some of the common or examples of some of the major things that we're looking for whenever we're permitting and inspecting facilities include ensuring that proper temperatures for foods and equipment are compliant with our current codes. It includes proper storage and labeling of toxic items that are compliant with our codes, ensuring that hand wash sinks meet minimum standards. And that includes hot water temperature, making sure they're in good repair, and that they're properly supplied and actually used accordingly. So you may have a sink, but it may not have running water, or you may have a sink with hot water, but it's not easily accessible to your employees, or they're not using it. So those are all things that are looked for in that regard. We're also making sure that management has the proper food handler certificates along with the actual employees who are conducting those activities, and that the general conditions of the establishment are clean and sanitary. As far as pools, some examples of the things that we're looking for whenever we're inspecting and permitting is ensuring sanitary conditions of the pool, and making sure that it's not only clean and swimmable, but the chemical balance of that pool is safe and healthy for swimmers to use. And so that includes apartment complexes, that includes Boys and Girls Club. You may have an HOA that has a community pool, things of that sort. Also making sure that safety equipment is in compliance. That includes drain covers, and that the pool is in good repair and generally safe for swimmers. We're also checking for paperwork to make sure that someone on staff or caretaker of the pool is certified as a pool operator. So there are certain certifications that you have to have in order to operate these types of facilities. And so with that, I'm going to let Kevin come up and just tell you a little bit more about what he does, and maybe a day in the life of a health inspector, and let you guys ask any questions of Kevin.
Hey, y'all doing? I've been with the city since '01, been inspecting since '03. But I still get, every week I get something new pops up, believe me. I get some questions, and I get these questions, I'll go, well, I can't answer that, let me find out, because I'm not gonna be Mr. Peabody and say I know everything, so, because it's much better to find out information. Now, one thing that wasn't mentioned, Stephen F. Austin is actually state property, and we don't inspect that. Just give you a head, the state inspector inspects it. I inspect the city limits in Nacogdoches, and of course the food trucks are getting a bit, since 2019, that has really been booming, and we're working on the ordinance, getting that kind of retouched up and revamped, and that's getting to be a pretty good one thing. We try to inspect minimum twice a year on any business that's permitted. That includes the pools, restaurants, grocery stores, motels. If we get a complaint, we do a follow-up, try to get there within 24 hours if possible. That's, if it's a really, sound like something pretty serious, imminent, we're gonna get out there immediately. Most of the complaints, it's really changed over the years. I hate to say it, but they're getting to be a lot more of these complaints that are not what I would call valid, but if we do get a complaint, we still treat it as it's an emergency and we're gonna go check it out. We found a few complaints that we get, particularly in restaurants. We get some of these and it could be a disgruntled employee or somebody that quit or got fired. And I've even had some that had pictures that they sent on software that wasn't even the same establishment. So, because I go, we go, that's not here, But I have to be neutral, and I have to, okay, we're going to make sure it's all good. We're looking at the big shit. I can't pick sides. I have to be neutral, So we do get those, and that's a challenge, but that's the way the world is. It's just part of it. I'm sure everybody that deals with complaints, that's the same for you all too. Now, let's see, the food bar, the food service and bar, that's just what that is, just a combination, say at Chili's, it's got a bar that's with it, and we check that out. TABC does those inspections, but I do also look at the bar, make sure the hand sink's in good shape, and that they have what's called test strips for sanitizing. I do some courtesy inspections. God tells when we just do it. We don't charge them. Nacogdoches County Group Home, that's the Burke Center. We take it them just kind of as a courtesy. We do the school service, and I just do the city limits in Nacogdoches, 11 schools, and Robbins over that. And I do the daycares with Beth. Now, the daycares and the nursing home kitchens in the county jail are all inspected by the state also. So I'm just kind of the choir there, preaching the choir, so on that. The food, like I said, the food trucks is an ongoing thing that's growing a lot. We do get motel complaints periodically too. Those are kind of hit or miss because sometimes it's something valid or sometimes it could be somebody that's not happy with the rate, and it's a customer service issue, but if I get a customer service complaint, I don't correct them. I just let them get through with it, and then I tell them, hey, you need to call their corporate office, and we'll take a look at this. And I don't do a health inspection. If that's the case, I do go to the motel and say, hey, you got a complaint, but it wasn't anything I can do. It's a customer service thing, just for your heads up. Give them an FYI. We get civil complaints too on apartments, and they're civil cases, but instead of trying to explain it to the person, I'll go, okay, we'll contact the property manager on your behalf and let them know about it. And then I usually will send them an email with some information on landlord-tenant issues, and also give them some information on mold mildew, because we get a lot of those that they think everything's mold when I'm not going to tell them it's not, but because it's usually mildew. Black mold's pretty uncommon. And then we haven't gotten the bed bug complaints in a while, knock on wood, but we were having them for a while too. And that's also kind of I will check it out, but that's a pest control issue. And these motels that are on the ball are already taking care of it because it's bad for business. Because social media is where they get torched, That's probably taking a lot of the less complaints is because somebody will get on a restaurant and a motel and they'll just do Facebook or Yelp, and I don't even look at that stuff because that's not evidence for me. That's hearsay. I can't depend on that being valid, so I usually don't go with that. Now, the swimming pools and spas, we do about 58 of those because it's a college town. We got apartments, motels, and then Boys and Girls Club, that kind of thing, and that season starts in May, June, July, August. I do those twice a year also, or on a complaint basis. The food trucks, I try to do them, if they're local, I'll do them every quarter, because I feel like that's fair to the brick and mortars, because there's not as much going on in a food truck. I'll be honest with you, a food truck should make 100 every time, because it's a smaller area, and if you do it right, you should take care of your list. So you'll see some hundreds on the food trucks that you won't see on the restaurants, because they don't have as much going on. So, but of course, if you let it get away from you, I've had a few food trucks that failed for hot water or something like that, and I had to shut them down. But we try to do those every quarter, but we have a lot of food trucks that they're not even local. They're coming from Jacksonville or Longview or Tyler or Lufkin. So they may not be in as often, so I try to get them when they're here. Does anybody got any questions for me or concerns?
When you have something like the Blueberry Festival and you have trucks that are coming from maybe even out of state, is there a requirement when they come in that they have to meet certain codes, or how does that work?
Well, that's a little different. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a temporary requirement, temporary food requirement.
Okay.
We're trying to get away from a lot of those unless it's a sanctioned event, with the city or the CVB or the chamber, and then we're gonna. The temporary requirements are under a lot less stringent thing. They don't even have to have a truck. They can, as long as they have a little situation where they have hot water and soap, and they have a canopy, and they keep the food stored properly, they can do it as a temporary setup. But I did have a temporary setup for a cookie place out of Wichita, was out here last week, and they didn't even have a truck, but they actually have a manufacturing company in Wichita, and they sold the cookies prepackaged, and it's,
So you're okay on
yeah,
that.
so that was fine, but and we get meat companies sometime that sell meat in the reefer trucks, that kind of thing. Okay.
And then one more question, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
On contaminated water source, I know like when we had the big freeze and
Oh, yeah.
stuff, how are we getting that out to the general public? Because sometimes it's kind of hard to tell where the water problem is, or what we need to shut down and things like that.
Yeah, they have a bank, phone number that's emergency. It used to be 559-2510. I can't remember. But they actually had robocalls, from what I understand, that were doing that.
Okay.
And because that freeze thing, I remember when we had that last winter.
Right.
They called me, and we weren't even going out to work those few days, but it was starting to thaw up. And they said, "Kevin, can you come into work?" I said, "Sure." I was wanting to work. I was getting bored. And the roads were getting a lot better, so they printed out a bunch of boil water notices, so I went out for about 3 days and hand-delivered those things. Because that's the only, I felt like we can blast it out there on the TV or the radio or whatever, but I felt more comfortable like talking to the people, so just let me go out and I thought that was a good idea. Because Nacogdoches is not that large of a city, you know. And
Do we have an automated call system on that? Is that what you just said?
So the city's been working with the county to obtain a new emergency notification software that will allow us to provide more targeted notifications based on geofencing and geolocation. And so that's something that we're getting ready to kick off here in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, good.
And so it'll be much quicker, have larger data bank. It allows us to be more specific in who we notify, so we're not notifying the entire city when it's just really like a block or two that needs to be included. So, and that's information that we can bring to you guys at a future meeting, or just share with you via email once it's up off the ground. Then you can share it with your colleagues and your counterparts.
And before the COVID, I used to have to do some speaking to a lot of SFA classes, but that hadn't happened in a while, and that may start back. And then I even speak to Lions Club, people like that. I get people that know me and come in. So I do some of that. It's kind of a customer service, public relations things. It's educating, like when I do these restaurant inspections and motel inspections, some of them, they have a lot of turnover, so I'm actually re-educating people and trying to train them on, instead of being the mean guy. I don't want to be mean, but if I have to, I will. If they don't do it, if they're being negligent. But we try to educate and make it good for them, because we want to protect the public and the safety of everybody. So it's that's kind of the way we look at it. Okay. Is anybody else, or are we good? Good to talk to everybody, and we'll see you next time. I'm glad we got this thing back going. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Kevin. All right, and so next we're going to talk about code enforcement. So code enforcement and the health department falls under the code enforcement department, so they really work hand in hand, and often they'll work together on inspections, and there's a little overlap there. So the primary duty of our code enforcement department is to preserve and promote high quality of life, and we do that by ensuring proper use and maintenance of private property. We also provide education, and we do our best to promote voluntary compliance. We never want to write anyone a ticket. It's always our goal to have as much voluntary compliance as possible and work with property owners. Oftentimes you'll have a scenario where someone may not have the resources to come into compliance right away, and so we'll often connect people with social groups or nonprofit organizations who do voluntary work. An example might be someone who needs their property cleaned up, but they don't have the physical means to do that. So we have a lot of fraternities and sororities who actually do some volunteer work in that regard. Also, general weed control. People have overgrown grass. Maybe they don't have a lawnmower. We'll connect them with groups who actually come in and do some of that voluntary work for them. So we always try to have voluntary compliance, but we do have instances where we do have to move forward with the citations and enforcement, but that's a rare instance. Anywho, so some of the common issues that code enforcement deals with include inoperable vehicles. These are inoperable vehicles on private property and public. So think of a street right-of-way, and that's really regulated and enforced by our police department, but our code enforcement works hand in hand with them with conducting those inspections and reporting those and working to contact the people in the area to identify who the car belongs to and try to get enforcement. Inoperable vehicles in the private driveway include a vehicle that essentially isn't operating. It could be that it's sitting on flat tires. It could be that there's undisturbed debris under it. You can tell it hasn't been moved in a very long time. It could be that essentially you can visibly see that it's kind of beyond disrepair. It could be expired on its plates. There's a lot of different things taken into consideration whenever we identify a vehicle as inoperable. Overgrown lots, these include weeded lots, tall grass. This is not a vacant, undeveloped rural lot where you have trees and vegetation and there's nothing built on it. This is a developed lot where you have a structure, either a house or a commercial building, and they've essentially let the grass overgrow. Unsightly and unsanitary conditions, this could be a number of things. It could be debris, could be litter, could be trash, could be multiple inoperable vehicles. It could be a number of things that accumulated are all on one site, and so we use that broad category of unsightly, unsanitary conditions. Dilapidated and unsafe structures. These essentially are primarily residential buildings, but they can include commercial structures that are unsafe, unsanitary, or unfit for human habitation. They can either constitute a fire hazard, either you may have a building that was recently burned down, but it hasn't been torn down, has been secured. You could have an otherwise dangerous structure. Maybe the roof is falling in, or maybe it doesn't have running water or heat, and so it's not suitable for being habitated, but there's been no will of the property owner to maintain that property or keep it in good condition. So there's a number of different things that could qualify a structure as unsafe or dilapidated. Stagnant water, and so speaking back to health, if you have a pool where they haven't been maintaining it, they haven't been cleaning it, you'll see it turn green. That could be an example of stagnant water. Also just general pools of water that could be on a residential or a commercial piece of property where it's actually encouraging the development of mosquitoes or other unsanitary conditions. Water and sewage leaks, these are essentially leaks on private property, but we do work with the property owner to either turn off the source at the right-of-way and then notify them, hey, you've got a serious leak. And these aren't, something small where maybe they have like a residential leak or they left their water hose on. It's normally a substantial thing, and I'll let Angela talk more about that in just a minute. Illegal dumping, we do have people who will just dump trash, their private trash at commercial businesses on the side of the road, in areas that don't have as much residential occupancy as other places, and so we have had some success with enforcing things like that through surveillance and security. We've actually had our public works work with private property owners to identify people who are actually doing that, and that has helped reduce those across the city. Illegal signs and zoning code. So our code enforcement department also helps us enforce our zoning regulations and illegal signs. Some examples of an illegal sign may be, we call them Snipe Signs. They're the small temporary signs that you can just kind of go out and stick into the right-of-way. We have a lot of people who will, you'll see those pop up around the spring when people are conducting garage sales. You'll see them pop up whenever you have a business that's opening. They'll have these grand opening signs that aren't permitted. They'll actually stick them in the right-of-way. And so in that regard, we'll just go and remove them from the property. But we also have people who will just construct signs without a permit, and they don't meet regulation. Either they're too tall or they're too large or they have too many. And so they help us regulate that too. And some of the most common ones that we see include weeded lots. This is really seasonal, so in the winter, in the fall, you won't see as much. In the spring, you see a really big uptake in weeded lots. Typically, this is excessive growth of 12 inches or higher. Also, rubbish and trash. So property owners are required to maintain their property free of trash, junk, and debris, and they're also required to maintain the sidewalk and right-of-way in front of their property free of trash and debris as well. Inoperable vehicles, we talked about that, and then also condemned and unsafe structures. So those are the top four that we typically see and that are the most visual as far as whenever you're driving through the city, what you see from the street. So in the fall of last year, we actually conducted a citywide windshield survey. With the additional staff, we really wanted to get an idea of where we were at as far as the number and variety of code enforcement cases, so that we could create a more strategic approach and look at what are the most prevalent code enforcement cases and where are those located. And so we can be more proactive and be more strategic in how we approach those. So again, the top 4, we just talked about those, included abandoned and junk vehicles, litter and rubbish, substandard buildings, and tall weeds. And this is just a breakdown of those various code violation types by category. And so we want to talk a little bit about some examples of the items that the board might actually hear. One of the things that we just took forward to City Council was an update to our Code of Ordinances to be compliant with state law. So last year, the state passed an ordinance, it's called Safe Outdoor Dogs Act. Essentially, it's an anti-animal cruelty act. It provided expanded definitions of adequate shelter, and so it actually defines adequate shelter in relation to tethering. And so if you tether an animal, you have to provide adequate shelter and access to water. And so the shelter actually has to be large enough for the dog to stand up, turn around, be able to move easily, and not be physically constrained. Again, it requires access to clean, drinkable, potable water, prohibits the use of chains. So oftentimes you'll see animals that are tethered either by a chain or they will be walked with weights or chains to increase the animal's strength. That actually can cause injury to the animal, and it's considered cruel and unusual punishment, so it actually provides a specific language regarding that, and it strikes a 24-hour waiting period. So in the past, if a patrol officer or code enforcement officer was to witness an animal that was in violation of this, they would have to give the property owner or animal owner a 24-hour notice. Well, this eliminates that, and so police officers and our animal control can take immediate action to secure the animal and move forward with citations and violations. So that's something that applies to code enforcement, animal control, or any sort of local law enforcement agency. And so those were the things that we took forward as an amendment. And part of that discussion was removing tethering altogether. So the city of Lufkin, when they amended their ordinance, they actually eliminated tethering and outlawed it within the city limits. And so we wanted to have a conversation about that. We wanted to do more research, look at some of the impacts that would have on maybe some of our lower income communities who may not have the resources to actually build a shelter or build an enclosure that would meet our requirements if they weren't able to use a tether to secure their animals. So that's something that we'll be taking forward to this board. We'll bring back some research, we'll have some community input, and we'll talk about what that looks like and look for recommendations from you guys to take forward to City Council. So that's an example of something that you guys might hear in relation to our animal code. Any questions about that? I know I'm going very quickly. The weather's going to be bad, so I'm trying to get through the material as quickly as possible. So, general conflict of interest. Some of these provisions apply to all our boards. State law prohibits public officials from taking official actions that substantially affect a matter in which the official, an immediate family member, or an associated organization has a substantial financial interest. I don't see that being an issue with this board just because you're not taking final action on anything. You're not hearing appeals. You're not legislative in nature. But I just did want to go over this with you, just to note that there may be some instances in the future where there may be a conflict of interest if you're making a recommendation on a policy or an ordinance that may directly impact a business that you're associated with or something of that nature. But I don't see it coming up a lot in your deliberations or discussions. So this just talks about when to avoid a vote or when to recuse yourself. Essentially, it's up to each member's discretion. And if there is something that comes up, we would have a one-on-one conversation with you and say, hey, this might create a conflict of interest, and give you guidance on whether or not you should recuse yourself, but it is something that's up to each individual board member. We also like to warn against the appearance of bias, and so sometimes even the appearance can have a negative impact on the board and your decision-making and then on future decision-making. And so that's just something that we would bring to the board members on an individual basis, or if you had questions, you could always reach out to us and we could give you guidance in that regard. But again, I don't see it coming up a lot with this committee. Open Meetings Act. So the Texas Open Meetings Act applies to all public boards, and so essentially it says that you can have a closed executive session, but it's very restricted in the items that you can talk about. So it includes personnel matters, including employee performance, compensation, or discipline. So that wouldn't apply to this board. damaging personal information, and the legal consultation for current or likely litigation. So oftentimes we'll have executive sessions with the city council regarding economic development agreements, personnel matters, the hiring of employees, impending litigation. Cities do get sued from time to time for different matters. And so those are things that you would have a discussion behind closed doors with the city attorney. Again, I don't see that happening with this committee, but it could. And so those are things that we would let you know ahead of time, and we would place on a public agenda, so there'd be no question as to when you guys would have a discussion behind closed doors. Other than that, the board is not allowed to have ex parte communications, meaning a discussion regarding a pending matter not included in the public record. So if there is an item that's slated for an agenda, essentially you're not allowed to have closed door conversations about that. And so there are some legal ramifications for that. It's not necessarily something that the city as a whole would be responsible for, but each individual member could be subject to lawsuit or criminal charges if you were found in violation of that act. And so we can provide more information about that. We actually, in your binder, provided a lot of background information directly from the Texas Attorney General's website. And we can answer any questions you may have about that. But again, if it's on the agenda, you just don't have closed door conversations about it. Or if you receive information concerning an item from the public, then you would just share that with staff. So we could share it with the rest of the committee, so everyone has access to the same information. And we publicly disclose that during a public hearing. And so it's just making sure we're transparent, and any information that you use during your deliberations is accessible to everyone else and and we have a public record of it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, I know we went through that quickly. I was trying to get you guys out of here before the weather went south. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we covered today in regards to the, yes, ma'am?
Do we keep these, or do
Yes,
you
ma'am.
keep these?
That is
Okay.
for you.
Will our code enforcement person be speaking with us too?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. I skipped over Angela. I am going to back up and let Angela Sal talk about code enforcement. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Sowell. I am the City of Nacogdoches Code Enforcement Supervisor. I've been working with the City of Nacogdoches 24 plus years. So Elena gave you a pretty good overview. So I was just wondering if you have any questions for me.
I do have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question. In your code enforcement, is that driven by complaint or by observation?
Previously, it was kind of by mostly complaints, but now since we're staffed, it's by observation. We do a lot of driving around. Also, we still get complaints. So it's probably about 40% complaints. Yes, ma'am. Come on, Hunter, I know you got something.
I'm trying to be quiet so we can get out of here. I'm giving you a break.
Okay.
Another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mosquitoes were mentioned in the
Mm-hmm.
overview, and I'm just wondering, is that on a scheduled basis that the,
Yes, ma'am, the Parks Department, they do a drive, and it's set up on rotation. I'm not sure what the rotation is, but yes, ma'am, it's done on a rotation basis. Different areas, you know, but I know he does it about 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, so, yes, ma'am. That it? Okay, well, thank y'all. Uh-huh.
Before we adjourn, I did want to let the board know that at the end of every meeting, we'll be asking you for future agenda items or future topics that you guys would like to hear. And so it could be related to animal services, health, code. We can't deliberate anything that's not posted on the agenda, but if you have topics you'd like to hear in the future, we can schedule those. And so we don't have to wait to do that at these meetings either. If you have a request, you can always email or call staff directly. And then we can schedule a meeting. So the board doesn't meet regularly, they meet as needed. And so if we don't have a topic, we won't meet. But we know we're gonna come forward with a workshop on the anti-tethering. Is there anything else that the board is interested in hearing or having a discussion about related to animal control or health or code or?
I would like to hear about the ordinance for the food trucks
Okay.
that's being adapted, changed, altered.
Anyone else?
And that new emergency system or broadcasting system.
Yes.
I'd like to hear about
I think we
that.
can bring that to the same meeting.
Okay. Do we have any problems with people living in their cars here? I've run across that in other states. Has that started to occur here yet?
Well,
Angie, do you wanna?
That's a big city, but small towns like Nacogdoches have that too, yeah. All of your time.
I'm seeing it, yeah.
I haven't run across that yet, but
Okay.
I've seen one person that's kinda, I see him in the car a lot, but, he says he doesn't live there. He doesn't have anything around in the yard or anything like that, but it just, I see him in that car a lot.
I
So,
just wondered if
yeah,
I've
but
seen it.
no, we don't. We haven't had that problem yet.
Thanks, sorry.
All right, any other items? And again, you know, if you think of anything between now and our future meeting, just give us a call, email us, and we can add it to the agenda. Or if, you know, depending on the nature of it, we may ask just to do some more research information and then schedule that. But we do want to meet with you guys more regularly because there are some things that we want to do. There's some work that needs to be done to our ordinances to bring them up to code. And then there are some new initiatives that we want to bring forward and get your feedback on as well. But again, we want to operate at the leisure of the committee, and so we're here. If there's anything that you're just interested in and you want more information and you want to learn about, let us know. Whether it's other departments that we can bring to you guys to give a short presentation on Parks and Recreation or Public Works or anything like that, just feel free to reach out, and we'll get that scheduled. With that, that concludes our presentation. If there's nothing else, we can go ahead and adjourn.
adjourn.
All right, thank you.